experience. And finally, to close, this session, I just want to express, a couple of the objectives of this meeting. I think I allowed my colleagues, to advance some of these objectives, but the main objective is to generate a collaboration between angel groups, and angel investors, individual investors, both in Brazil, in Latin America, and in groups abroad. So that's the main thrust of this event. What led us, to organize this event was to promote this collaboration. What's the goal there? Is I think it was Binder who said, investing nowadays is a global endeavor. Markets are globalized, so more and more you're going to need, this cooperation among business angels groups, as well as among business angel groups and seed capital funds. So I think we have to promote collaboration or horizontal collaboration across countries, across regions, across Brazil. A good example, Gávea Angels in Accelerator Attack with Mike, we had already made an initial co-investment. There's a colleague, Rodrigo Baluc from Gávea Angels from Argentina. They have collaborated with some Chileans in some co-investments. We have to develop more and more co-investments inside Brazil, inside Latin America, and perhaps in the future, across continents with Europeans as well, Portuguese. And we're discussing some opportunities already jointly with Portugal, as well with the United States. So I think the wave of the future, what we have to build, is more and more this intense collaboration among angels, in between angels and seed capital funds, because VC has been moving up, as Binder knows, and he's going to talk us about later. And so more and more angels are going to fill in a larger gap. If to fill this gap, you're going to need co-investments with other business angel groups as well as the seed capital funds. So I think, having said that, I wish you all a great event, and let's do. I hope we can do a lot of networking, learn a lot, and it's going to be hopefully going to be a very good capacity building for all of us. And without further ado, I'd like to invite our colleagues to take a seat and invite Catherine to give the opening keynote speech.
I hope to make this an interactive session, so I'm going to give a lot of information about what's going on in the United States, and you'll see some interesting statistics where angels, VCs fit, where angel groups are collaborating, and I'm going to talk about it both from the overall piece and can also relate it to individual groups. So we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. And I also look forward to finding out more about what's going on here in Brazil and Latin America. As Antonio has talked about, there's more and more syndication and collaboration among investments in all places. This slide talks about what the Angel Capital Association is. And the Angel Capital Association itself is a young organization. It's just about 10 years old, maybe next year. And it represents 180 angel groups, or I said 170 here, but I think it's a little larger, angel groups in the United States and Canada. There are 8,000 accredited investors and some affiliated organizations, which are economic development groups. Now, in the United States, we have to be accredited investors to look at a business plan without violating our SEC regulations on stock, which means we have to prove as angels we have enough money that we can afford to lose it. That's what the accreditation rule is. The ACA has members in 48 states, and we also have a sister organization called ARI, which some of you may have had classes from before. They're an educational group. They help us create a lot of the statistics for this work, as well as are currently putting together a report called the HALO report, which talks about actual investments by quarter by angel investors and collaborations. So the Silicon Valley Bank is sponsoring that, and there's a separate report which comes out and is a public document talking about the activity of angel groups. Because the more as you hear that you talk about that, the higher profile it has. And we've seen that angel groups are coming into the spaces where VCs used to be. So there's a lot of issues out there for angel capital investors. You may be familiar with some of the larger angel groups in the United States. Certainly the oldest is Band of Angels in California, which has been around close to 25 years. Golden Seeds is a group that nationally invests in women-owned businesses. There's Common Angels in Boston. We have some Boston people speaking today. So there's small organizations and there's large organizations. You can have angel groups from 10 people to some of them have 300 in 5 chapters, but those are the exceptions. Most angel groups are around 30 members, 40 members. which is this sort of profile of the angel groups in the United States. So the average member group has been around 9 years. It says the number of investments is 10, which I think is a little low, if you want the truth. I do think that's a little low. They've had 2 exits or closures, and again, I think that's low because the risk rate's higher. You would have more failures in terms of exits. The members who are on most, but not all angel members are cash out entrepreneurs. A lot of them are C-level executives at large corporations, but the drive to continue the entrepreneurial role and not do it yourself makes people excited about angel investing. The average age, I think this is high too, is 57. So if you're below that, you should feel lucky. If you're above that, you say, well, you're bringing the average up. We are getting lots of younger entrepreneurs, people who've cashed out, and especially in the internet space, but not always, and they're happy to be angel investors also. So you're seeing younger people join it, and in certain spaces like social media, it's a young person's space. And I don't know why. He's going to bring it back on. The percentage of wealth in angel investment, most people keep it around 10%. Some people increase that, but it's because the risk profile is so high. You have a greater opportunity. This is your alternative space. This is not where you're making your most money. So 10% of your wealth in that space is not bad. The education, too, for an angel investor is really, they're saying master's degree, maybe, maybe not. Okay, thank you. And I'm going to show a profile of Jumpstart because we can relate very directly to what's going on nationally. We've been around about the same number of years. And when the group formed, it had a hard time making its first investments. Okay, getting that first $100,000 into a company was very difficult. But the number of founding members was 12. We have currently about 40 members. We've made 47 investments. So that's why I thought the average investment number for median was very small at 10. But we've made 68 investment rounds. So we do follow on. So if you've got an investment from Jumpstart, you continue to follow on, and that's what the larger groups will tend to do so. We do $200,000 to $1 million in a first round, and I will tell you this, most angel groups can't do $1 million by themselves. We have really attracted a lot of active investors, so we can do that where there's interest to put $1 million in. So we're looking like a small VC, not acting like it. We don't want to act like it, but we do want to invest like it. Total investments to date around $32 million, and this number is out of date. It's a little higher now. We've had exits and closures of 15 companies, more exits because the company didn't function. So in the 10 range, it's sort of like a failure, and 5 that have been positive or have generated profit. We have a lot of companies who've received additional funding from VCs, and so the valuation is up. So we've got a lot of exits to wait for. And I want to also briefly talk about accelerators in education. One of the colleagues here talked about how important the ecosystem is and education of entrepreneurs. U.S. Angels, individual angels, have founded and funded accelerators, Y Combinator, Dream It, some of the larger groups. Jumpstart this year funded a tech launch accelerator. It's the first angel group to do so. It's called Tech Launch. It's in New Jersey. The New Jersey Economic Development Authority also put funding in it. So angels know that early stage companies are really important, so they're actually channeling money into that space. The ACA members fund about 800 new companies a year, mostly in the US and Canada. There's probably a little cross-border investing, but it's not that high. Angels are still very geographic. They want to be close to these early stage companies, but they will invest with trusted partners. There's more than 5,000 companies in the portfolio of the ACA groups, Generally, but not always, angels like to take a board seat or an observer seat, depending upon the size of their investment. I would say for Jumpstart, we probably do about half have board seats or observers. Sometimes we're just a very small part of a deal. But this whole group of angels sees 75,000 plus in terms of companies. And they lead the deal flow in their communities. Jumpstart sees somewhere around 150, 200, maybe more companies a month, just deal flow. Doesn't mean it's the right deal flow. It just means it's deals coming to us for funding. And the exits these days are essentially all M&A, all mergers and acquisitions from strategic partners. The IPO market is not really available to any of these companies. So strategic partners and strategic partner cultivation is becoming very important for angel groups because we want to make sure that we get an exit. This is just a list of some of the portfolio companies that have shown really, really great performance and exits that were angel funded from angel groups. Carbonite, you may have heard of. Protease Pharmaceuticals is a medical drug. So everything, and Zipcar, which we were just actually talking about coming over here today. So interesting companies, some that are very large, have been funded by angels. The big trends that are occurring today are, I think, actually occurring here too. Syndication of investment rounds with other angel groups. Right now, the early stage VC money is really evaporated. There aren't early stage VCs in the United States. And what happens is, so angels are filling that space. So if a company needs $500,000 and they can get it from 2 angel groups, that will occur. And if they can continue to take angel money rather than VC money, it's been very successful. So you see groups that never would talk to each other say, I have an energy deal, and I bring it to somebody else who does it, and they will invest cross-country. So what's happened is through groups like the ACA, people have met each other, found like groups, have really created trust. Because you all know you're not going to invest with anybody you don't know and you don't trust. So that trust component's very important. And the Angel Capital National Summits, which bring everybody together for, and next year they'll be in April in San Francisco. Those are valuable. I have met colleagues here from Latin America because the day before the ACA starts, there's international exchange, and then they continue to stay at the ACA meeting. Those are great networking events and great places to find other partners for investment. So angels are doing angel-only investments. And that actually works out pretty well sometimes. So if you can bring a company to cash flow positive or an exit by only having angel investors, capital efficient angel investors, the company does better and the investors do better. And that's the model that people would like to do. Now in some spaces you really have to take large expansion funding down the road from VCs. And that's fine too. I mean, I will say that I have friends who are VCs. But we would rather do a deal by ourselves. That if we find a deal that technology we can't evaluate, that needs more money than we can do, I take it to my favorite VCs and say, if you like this and you do the due diligence, we're in alongside you. And so they like that because we are a deal sourcing space for them also. But do we do better if we can fund it ourselves? Yes. The other thing we see on the horizon right now is crowdfunding. Now, that's 2 parts to it. There's crowdfunding right now, which is companies can go online and have advanced purchases of products. Companies can go online and have donations made to them for research or for other activities. But right now in the United States, you cannot have an equity purchase via crowdfunding vehicle. There is regulations, though, in front of Congress and the SEC to make that happen. The rules have not been issued, but they expect to be issued sometime this year, beginning of next year. So it may change the landscape a bit, and it may open funding to companies that don't normally get funding through the angel groups. Most angel groups are looking for high growth companies. This may be the local restaurant, this may be a local retail shop, it may be a research. Other sources will go through crowdfunding, but the typical high growth company may not receive funding this way. And it may prohibit them, because if you take in 1,000 investors through a crowdfunding platform, people are going to be reluctant to invest in you because your cap table is very distorted. So I think what high growth companies are seeing today will continue to occur. We don't know yet. It could be a big bust when it comes to equity space, but it's out there. People are paying attention to it, and I think it's going to be have some movement on the landscape. We also see an increase of angel investors into groups. It's always smarter to have people around you who are peers and who have more knowledge than you do, both on investing or a different space of business. So a lot of cashed out entrepreneurs, and this is true of Jumpstart also. We've gotten a big flood recently of people who are leaving businesses or sold businesses, or who want to take their money and invest it in alternative vehicles. So I don't know how that's working here, but it's an important trend for us. And that also increases this issue of need for angel investor education. So people come in with a lot of business experience, but may not understand the landscape or the metrics for angel investing. And angel investor education, to me, also includes a lot of education for entrepreneurs. Because the more an entrepreneur knows what to expect in the funding process, the better prepared they'll be, and the better they may have an opportunity to achieve that investment in capital. So I think that's very, very important. In 2012, I mentioned that there's always some issue in the United States about federal taxes, and we're going to see a tax increase now that Obama's in capital gains, now that Obama's in place. They've talked about Innovation Coalition is very important to the economy, because I'm going to have a slide later on that's going to show you that startups are the generator for employment increases in the United States, which has been a big political asset for angels talking to the government. The other thing I did mention was the HALO report, which is talking about actual data sets of active investments in the United States by quarter by angels. And the ACA certainly has a lot of information both on policy and communications on things that are important to angel investors in the United States. Some of you may already be familiar with the Angel Resource Institute, which is focused on entrepreneurs and angels. The Angel Capital Association was actually founded with assistance from the Kaufman Foundation, which in the United States is a foundation that focuses on entrepreneurs. They don't care about angels, but they care about that entrepreneurs could be funded. So they essentially pulled together all the angel groups and gave a little organizational funding and said, do you want to create an organization? And so the Kaufman Foundation has continued to fund education and research on what angel trends. And the ARI gives a lot of programs on power of angel investing, on exits, on things that are important to angels as well as entrepreneurs. So let's talk about what's actually occurring. We talk about it in general, but we can be very, very specific. There's lots of trends. This trend I talked to you about, how angels are far more important to both employment numbers as well as to the funding of early stage startups. These very large companies were all backed by angel investors. So some of the largest ones in the world. And of course, you can certainly see the startups like Google and PayPal. And this slide, which is hard to read, but it essentially says, if you remove startups funded by angel groups, there is no employment growth in the United States from 1980 through the 2000s. okay? And everything that occurred, the red line is the employment levels without startups. And with startups, you see that there's an increase every year in employment. So this has been a big political argument for the funding of startups. There's not a lot of United States public money for startups. It's done by state or economic development authorities, and it varies. I'm fine, thank you. I've got one. So this has been something that our legislators pay a lot of attention to, and is one of the discussions that are used for this capital gains tax, where we have a lower rate on that. Now, this is the most important slide here for information. And what it says is that Angels will fund in the neighborhood of 44,000 seed and startup and early stage companies. And the number that are funded by VCs, you add them together, it's about 1,200, maybe 1,100. So everyone who thinks that VCs are going to give money to early stage companies, this says the odds are not in your favor. And which is not you need to know this from as a startup company. I mean, angels know this. Okay, our friends the VCs will talk to every startup and say, "Oh yes, come back and visit me. This looks interesting. Come back in 6 months when you see me." Thinks that they're going to be getting money from the VCs, but my friends the VCs rarely write a check to a startup. And so that's important to know in our environment. I don't know how it is here in Brazil and in Latin America, but I suspect it's about the same way. So certainly the VCs take on expansion funding. But even then, look, they're investing in 3,000 companies, 2,000 companies, something around that neighborhood, where angels are investing in a lot larger number, which is really sort of summarized here on this slide. Now this also has some information which a lot of people don't recognize. Angels, not the angels in the angel capital groups, but angels all over, and it does not exclude, it excludes real estate, it excludes oil and gas leases, so the big dollar issues. Angels invest $22 billion in 2011. VCs invested $28 billion in 2011. And in some prior years, right before 2008 when we had the crunch, the angel number was the same or slightly higher than the VC number. So angels are truly a powerhouse. And we talked about 66,000 deals in 2011 for angels versus barely 4,000 for VCs. So the odds say you need to cultivate your angel friends more than you need to cultivate your VC friends. But talk to the VCs, because the VCs will introduce you to angels. They'll introduce you to other sources. So they're a good source of introductions, just not a good source of checks. Now, this study, which is done by the University of New Hampshire, says there's about 300,000 angel investors. But there's not 300,000 angel investors in groups. Sometimes an angel investor can be your mother, your father, your aunt, or uncle who funds you. But focused angels, which you all are here in terms of you have a focus, you have a process, you have a way to truly evaluate a business as a business investment, not an investment in a child that you love. Okay, I always tell people they have to treat their mothers and fathers good when they make them invest in these deals. So in the United States, you have to have $200,000 worth of annual income or $1 million of assets excluding your home. And that's this SEC test, to be able to look at a business plan without violating SEC or Securities and Exchange Commission guidelines. Because if a company gives a business plan to an unaccredited investor, that is considered illegal. So that's why angel groups consist of accredited investors. So you really have to be an accredited investor to join a group. So they're saying there's around 9 million millionaires in the United States. Informal investors, maybe 1 million. Active angels, maybe 265,000. and investors and angel groups about 15,000. So the active individual angels and the angel groups are really the powerhouses, I think, for the next wave of angel investing. You see that, you see the growth, you see the relationships that are forming, and the part of the reason for the ARI statistics and the Halo report is that angel investing is really becoming its own asset class. We have the VC investing, we now have statistics on angel activity, and angel groups are really attracting quality deals, quality investors, and the next piece of this is really, well, certainly the number of angel groups has grown. Now, some angel groups are more economic development groups. They've been funded by states, but not a lot of, they don't have a lot of active investors. Now, you all know why angels join groups. This is not your full-time job, okay? Joining an angel group eases the pain of valuations of a company. A variety of business experiences around the table. Standardized processes and term sheets. So you get a feel, you know where you're going. You know what's looking important for the group. And generally, angels get to pick and choose deals that they like. Some angel groups have funds where people vote. A lot of angel groups, like Jumpstart, you vote with your own check. So we create deal teams, and members who go into them, they decide how much they're going to invest or not invest. So you're not obligated to invest in everything that the group sees. Deal flow is encouraged. I mean, we will go out looking for deal flow. We have people come to us. Our accountants, our VCs, our lawyers bring us deals because there is a dearth. There's not enough money for early stage companies at all. And within a group, you have a greater chance of finding someone who has the skills to aid the company move forward, this smart money, because you cannot just give out dumb money. You have to have smart money, otherwise you're not going to succeed as an angel group, no matter how good the company is. If you can't add something more than money, it's not going to be a good investment for you. And what happens is you find like-minded people. And I think a successful angel group is a group that feels that there's peers around the table, active investors who think the person next to them at the table is smarter than they are, who are happy to find other people who have other experience to bring to aid a business. So the average angel group, I think, invests somewhere around $250,000, $300,000 in a deal. The number's been moving up over the years. This chart shows that maybe less than 10% will do $25,000 to $100,000. Another 15% will do $100,000 to $25,000. And then I would say about 25% will do somewhere around $1 million. And those tend to be the bigger groups on the West Coast and in the middle of the United States and Texas. Texas is also a powerhouse for angel investing these days. In fact, the ACA had their 2012 summit in Austin right before South by Southwest, which is this big extravaganza now where all the new startups are launched in the interactive space. So different, and there was a lot of interest for the angels to stay there and take a look at these companies. As well as, I ran into it, I spoke before one group there also, which was, I think, one of the UK delegations to South by Southwest, where the economic development arms in different countries and different cities are sending teams of entrepreneurs, 10, 12, 20 entrepreneurs to South by Southwest to launch and demo their products for investors. So it's become an international hub also for interactive companies. So the investment for angels is very broad, and as you see, 67% of them will invest $150,000 to $500,000. I think that's really a good marker for the groups. The average deal size is increasing, and there's a statistic later on which talks about the average size when you invest with another angel group is also increasing. We use this term called syndication to talk about 2 or 3 or 4 angel groups coming together to fund a company. And syndication has really been increasing, as I mentioned before. People are much more comfortable trusting other groups to work with. It says here that only 4% of angel groups will invest over $750,000. And I think that's really true. But I was talking before, and 500,000 is not a too large a number for an angel investment. It was a gentleman from the United States who didn't know his own statistics yet. So this is investment activity per group. So the median is 6 to 7 deals. Total invested, 200,000 to 2 million. Average per deal, 240 to 300. So 250 to $300,000. So I think that's a good number for an average investment from an angel group. So if you have a deal that needs to have 500,000 to reach its next milestone, you might be able to take it to another angel group, and 2 people can fund it. 2 groups can fund it. But you see the range is really high, 0 to 55. And some of this 55, in Ohio, the state has given out lots of small funds for angels to manage. So companies might get $10,000 or $25,000 from the state, and it's managed by angels, and that increases the number of deals, but not the number of dollars that go to a company. And I've never seen, but somebody must have it, that the total invested, which may be cumulative, $15 million in an angel deal. Golden Seas is listed here as among the most active, and I believe that's because there's like 200 members across the United States, but the Tech Coast Angels in the San Diego area have 300 members and 5 chapters. San Francisco and LA also have large groups. The East Coast, I can't think of a local East Coast group from New York down through DC that has more than 70 members. So the largest angel investing groups, New York Angels, Jumpstart, we invest more than $1 million. So we've invested $30 million to date in a lot of deals. So if you look at us, so we look like a small fund of a $60 million VC fund. So that's what angels can be. But it took us a long time to get to that place. And we don't have a fund. We just have people putting their own checks down. I think most people will say that 200 to 500,000 or 200 to 300,000 is a preferred range. Because if you're looking at early stage startups, you're quite happy to give them multiple rounds. Take 250 now and 250 later when you've achieved whatever your milestones are. And we've actually done deals where we tranche that into the term sheet. This particular slide is no surprise to anybody. Everyone really prefers to be in the seed and early stage startup space. Now, saying that, we, as well as other angel groups, will invest in later stage companies that have significant sales if we're really investing in an expansion. So it's all opportunistic, what comes in, what they need. But if someone comes to us looking for $5 million, we don't even talk to them. It's not in our space. What this side says is that angels invest in everything, okay? Because this is preferences by sector, so just about everything is 50%. People like it. The 3 areas that are really hot these days, mobile and telecom, internet certainly with a lot of social media, And while we're on the East Coast, we don't do social media per se. We rather prefer something that's business to business, mobile. We don't really do consumer-facing investments. Software, of course, because everybody's moving to SaaS models, which reduces the cost of a startup, and makes it available to everyone immediately. And you'll see healthcare here is a high interest and investment rate. Now this says preferences, but I know for a fact that Jumpstart, we've never done drugs, okay, or drug development. It's too expensive, too long. And I've come out of a pharmacy and biotech finance area, so I know this space very well. It's very difficult to make money. It's going to be 15 years, so many hundreds of millions of dollars. You come in at the beginning, and you're going to be wiped out in terms of value later on. So most angel groups have looked at healthcare diagnostics and devices, which we also have invested in. And we're not stopped there, but what's happened is the second round of funding for devices and diagnostics used to be the VCs, so it would be angels to prove it, VCs to get it through the regulatory process, and then it would be licensed off to a third party and exited. The VC money is no longer there. That $3 to $5 million, they're backed up on investments that they've made in the healthcare space, and they're not putting any more money in there. So we see that. I don't know how it is here, but that's a path that has really changed. So we might look at those kind of deals, but if we don't think there's truly anybody waiting for that VC money, we're not interested in it. Now, that doesn't mean we don't dabble. Angels violate every rule they have. So we actually have a company that we're looking at which has a diagnostics for concussions. And we're actually looking at somebody who has some kind of diabetes therapy. But it's a member choice in terms of taking a look at those areas. It means we're going to look and talk to them. Maybe we'll be like VCs. You can come talk to us, but we're not sure we're going to write that check. I would say the average group's somewhere around 25 to 50. These are membership organizations. As you know, it's hard to manage a membership organization. And people come together looking to do investments, and they believe it's an investing group, and then it turns into a membership group where you have all these people to manage. You have members who are in charge of different functions. So I think it gets hard to get over 50 or so members without a full staff. Now this is where people want to have their preferred follow-on investments. So of course they prefer other individual angels or other angel groups. VCs we still love, but you're going to get most of the investment from other angels. Now this is where we talk about how syndication, seeking out other angel firms, adds dollars to a deal and keeps it in the angel sphere. Now, it talks about the fact that the median length of time to close a deal is 90 days with another angel group. I think that's a fair number. We're not moving fast. I don't know how it closes here, but it takes a while. And the new median funding from going to another angel group is another, say, $200,000. It's generally something to top off a deal. So the percent is closed is a percent of deals closed as syndicated deals. This says 65%. And I think that's true on the coasts. I'm not sure it's true other places. I think it's a little high. But it's become a trend. 5 years ago, angel groups within the ACA were not syndicating. They were syndicating maybe in the Boston area, maybe in the New York area, certainly a little California, but that was it. Now it's become a very big trend. People in Ohio and Boston will syndicate a deal. And Jumpstart has done, I would say, 3 deals in the last 2 years where we syndicated it in Pennsylvania and in Boston. This always comes up as a question, and I'd be curious later on when we talk about finding out how it's done here. Most of our rounds are priced, which means we want to have a valuation when we go into a deal. We want to say this company's worth $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million, and write the terms based on that. A convertible note is a deal which is favored on the West Coast a lot, or sometimes out of the accelerators, which essentially says the next round of funding you get, if you invest today, will give you a value that is 20% less than the next round of funding that a professional investor comes into. And if the one time as an angel, you really have an opportunity to influence your outcome in a successful venture, it's when you price the deal. Because maybe the risk that you get for waiting for that next round is not, you've far exceeds a 20% discount. You've gotten it through the toughest times. So most angels prefer to fix a valuation on their rounds. And I don't know how it goes here. Now some people don't care. They say, oh, I don't care. Some of the VCs don't care because they're expecting what they put out in early stage companies, half of it to fail or more. So they're not going to spend time arguing over valuation. And the deal flow is very high in the United States. I would say, and it's really true overall, 4%. I would say 4% is good of the companies who apply get funded, because there's so many things that come through the funnel that you have the choice. And some of the companies these are statistics where some groups have pre-screening, and they take 1 out of the 4 in the pre-screening. They take 1 out of 3 to present to due diligence. In due diligence, after you've been accepted for an investment meeting, 1 out of 3 will succeed. And if you go to an investment stage, 1 out of 2. And I think that's pretty accurate. At Jumpstart, we have 3 to 4 companies present. Sometimes all 4 can get a deal team, which is always amazing. And other times, 1 out of the 4 will get one. So just how it appeals to the investor. And so with that, I'm happy to take questions or find out information about what's going on here.
Do you have statistics on return on investment for angels?
No. ARI has some statistics that come out there saying that recent performance is maybe around 3% return or ROI, which is better than the VCs, which is a negative number for the period that was measured. But it's so quirky and individual. Like people ask us for Jumpstart, do you have a return on your portfolio? Well, we don't really have a portfolio because we may have 2 people in one deal, 5 people in another deal. Each individual investor almost has a different portfolio. So I think it's hard to do. I mean, years ago, the preferred expectation was 3 to 5 times your money in 3 to 5 years, but that's long been outside because companies are not exiting fast enough in the slowdown. So it's taking 7 to 8 years for a company to exit. Now, sometimes in a fast internet space, there may be a flip soon. And Jumpstart did have one very interesting exit, 5 times the investment in 18 months. But that was really, it's always serendipity. You can never project this.
Hi, Catherine. I'm Marcelo from Floripa Angels. I'd like to know a bit more about government benefits for angel investment in the U.S.
That's really easy. That there exists as a tiny bit of, for our capital gains, gain that you hold over, a stock that you hold over a certain period of time, you get a lower tax rate for that. But I believe that's going to be adjusted with the new change in the elections. There's been some work in Congress to try and get a total exemption for angel capital investments. No capital gains tax on it, but I think that will take years to actually happen. Now, I will say this. There are some states that give a small tax credit, but it's by state. They'll give you a 10% or 15% tax credit, and some actually will write you a return check if you're not in that state, but it's very few and far between. We have nothing like that in New Jersey or Ohio has that, which is very attractive there. And some states like Ohio, Connecticut, and Texas have taken essentially large amounts of money and said, we're funding startups, we'll have more economic development in those spaces, but they may be loans, but still the fact that they're going to infuse $100 million into a startup economy is wonderful.
My name is Ana. I'm representing the MIT Alumni Club in Brazil. My question is about investor accreditation. Coming back to Brazil, I've noticed this inflow of people who are wealthy enough and want to be angel investors. As an entrepreneur myself, I feel very cautious because I'm not completely sure if they have enough wealth to take the chance of losing the money they are investing. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about how important it is or not to have those regulations about what it's needed to be an accredited investor in a country.
As an investor, I'm not so sure that it does. What it does is it's from the government side. It protects those people who can't afford to lose the money from going into risky deals. But as an investor, what we sort of key on is we ask that our investors in our group invest at least $50,000 a year. And the reason for that is that just sort of separates those who are going to invest and those who are not going to invest. Because a lot of people have a risk profile. They may have money, but if they've not made a payroll, if they've not done something risky or started a business, I think they may not have the appetite for that kind of investment. And I think you have to have a direct one-on-one conversation with them and also find out, will they be willing to follow you in subsequent rounds? There's a term we refer to as keeping dry powder, which is, you're making an investment in a company, but it's never one and done. You want to make sure you're there for the next round when they need some funding. So I think it's a reasonable expectation to have that kind of conversation with an investor.
So I'd like to thank you, Catherine, for the nice exposition. I think you learned everything you wanted to know about angel investing in the U.S. and we were afraid to ask, but I guess if you still have time, to ask more questions to Catherine in the breakout sessions and in the networking. So let's for lucky we're advancing in our program. So let's move on with the next block. The next session is a panel. We're going to be discussing development and operation of angel groups and funds, challenges and opportunities. And I think Catherine in a way already launched that debate and so how hard it is to start a fund. She gave us some numbers about how big are the angel groups in the U.S. How long it takes to develop an angel group. And I guess most of the situation in Brazil, most of the angel groups are very emerging. And there's a lot of anxiety among my colleagues. Gávea Angels have been anxious also for over 10 years. We're 10 years, but still anxious about how to keep a group growing. That's part of the business of dealing with an angel group. It's how you always work, to keep the business, the group growing and investing. So there's a lot of learning, to have, among us in terms of exchanging experiences and expectations. So I'd like to invite our session speaker, Ralph Hurley from the Clean Energy Venture Group in Boston. Ralph, where are you? In fact, the idea for this panel came after I was in Boston and had a conversation with Ralph, and where he exactly was telling how hard it was even for a group in Boston to get started and how long it took to put together the group. And I think it's good for us people here in Brazil and the colleagues in Latin America to realize, okay, they're like thousands of groups in the U.S. They've been investing a much larger amount of money. They've been working in that for much longer. But the difficulty of putting together a group and organizing and running a group, is still very, very real, even for the U.S. Experience. And that's out of a conversation we had in the bar with Ralph that came out of this idea for this panel, because it shows how to grow a group, how to start, and how to maintain a group. It's very important. So Ralph is going to be give us the session, the opening words about tell a little story, and then also. Please, Ralph. Then I'd like to invite Pedro Mendes Galandi, president of the board of directors of Vitória Investidores-anjo, which is one of the newest angel investing groups in Brazil, in the state of Espírito Santo, Vitória. Ernesto, you're going to be able to attend, or? Okay. Unfortunately, Mr. Ernesto Weber is going to have to leave. He's leaving for a trip today, and his flight has been anticipated, so I'm going to fill in for him. I also like to invite Rodrigo Baluca from Gávea Angels to tell us a little bit of experience of this one of the prominent business angel group in Buenos Aires in Argentina. Also, Mr. Eric Mushilak from IDE to talk a little bit about the fund side, Eric has run an angel group and a fund now. How to set up a seed fund? Is like a lot of similar problems and challenges. And Mr. Rodrigo Esteves is here from Confrapar.